January 21st, 1945. A communications bunker buried in the frozen earth of the Hunsrück Mountains, Germany. The world for Signals auxiliary Anneliese Schmidt, age 19, has shrunk to the crackle of a dying radio and the rhythmic tremor that shudders through the concrete walls. For 2 days, the tremors have been growing closer, a deep, guttural growl that speaks of engines far larger than their own Wehrmacht supply trucks. It is the sound of the apocalypse, the sound of the approaching army. The air in the bunker is thick with the smell of stale coffee, ozone from the equipment, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. Her headset is silent now. The last coherent message came hours ago from a command post 20 kilometers to the west, a frantic scream, the unmistakable chatter of a Browning machine gun. Then nothing. Now there is only static, a ghost whispering of a front line that no longer exists. Her commander, a stern Oberleutnant with eyes hollowed out by lack of sleep, has just given the final order: destroy the equipment. The heavy steel hammers feel clumsy in the girl's hands. They bring them down on the delicate vacuum tubes and intricate wiring of the Siemens teleprinters, the devices that had connected them to a collapsing Reich. Each crash is a death knell. Anneliese looks at her friend, Greta, whose face is pale and streaked with grime. They don't speak. There is nothing left to say. They have been told what to expect. They have seen the newsreels, read the pamphlets distributed by Dr. Goebbels' ministry. The Americans, they were told, are gangsters and degenerates from the slums of Chicago and New York. They do not take prisoners, not women. They are animals, driven by bloodlust and perversion. Suddenly, a new sound cuts through the muffled thumps of the hammers, a roar, followed by a deafening crash that throws dust and concrete chips from the ceiling. A Sherman tank. It must be sitting directly on top of them. The ground shakes violently, and the single flickering bulb overhead dies, plunging them into absolute darkness. Someone screams. The moment is suspended in suffocating blackness, punctuated only by ragged, terrified breathing. Then a new noise, the scraping of heavy steel. The bunker's armored door is being forced. Light explodes into the room, a blinding white rectangle framing monstrous silhouettes. They are huge, larger than any German soldiers Anneliese has ever seen, bundled in olive drab wool and armed with weapons that look brutally efficient. M1 Garands, a Thompson submachine gun held at the ready. A voice, hard and guttural, barks in English. Out, everybody out, Hände hoch. Sergeant John Riley of the 26th Infantry Division, the Yankee Division, watches them file out. He is 24 years old but feels closer to 50. The Battle of the Bulge has scoured the youth from his face, leaving behind a permanent exhaustion. His platoon has been fighting for 90 days straight, through forests that look like splintered skeletons and towns that are nothing but rubble. All he wants is a hot meal and to not be shot at for 12 hours. Instead, he has a bunker full of girls. Most of them aren't even out of their teens. They stand shivering in the biting wind, their hands raised high, their faces a mixture of defiance and stark terror. They are dressed in thin, gray wool greatcoats, completely inadequate for the weather. The sky overhead is the color of lead, heavy and pregnant with snow. The wind already has a razor's edge. Riley's orders are simple: disarm the prisoners and march them 5 miles east to a regimental collection point. 5 miles. It doesn't sound like much, but as he looks at the prisoners, then back at the darkening sky, a knot of unease tightens in his gut. The first snowflakes, large and wet, begin to drift down from the bruised heavens, melting on the barrel of his rifle. He pulls his collar tighter and yells to his men. All right, get him in a column, 2 by 2. Keep him moving. He gestures with his Garand. Let's go. March. The column of gray-clad women and their heavily armed American guards begins to move, a somber procession stepping off the edge of the world and into the heart of a gathering storm.
The march begins in near silence, broken only by the rhythmic crunch of boots on the rapidly whitening ground and the occasional sharp command from the GIs. For Anneliese, every step is an exercise in controlled terror. She walks beside Greta, their shoulders occasionally bumping. They dare not speak. They focus on the back of the woman in front of them, trying to make themselves as small and unnoticeable as possible. The American guards flank them, their faces hidden by the low brims of their helmets, their rifles held in a casual, menacing way. Anneliese keeps her eyes down, but she feels their presence, their foreignness. She listens to their low chatter, the strange cadence of their English. She remembers the posters of the monstrous American soldier, a drooling ape with a club in his hand, dragging a German woman by the hair. Was that what awaited them? The snow is no longer drifting. It drives at them now, a horizontal onslaught of white flakes that sting their cheeks and obscure the path ahead. The world has dissolved into a swirling vortex of gray and white. The temperature plummets. The thin wool of Annalise's coat feels like paper against the wind's icy teeth. Her shoes, sturdy leather boots meant for a barracks, are already soaked through. Her feet are becoming numb, lifeless blocks of ice. She sees other women stumbling, their faces drawn and blue with cold. The initial fear of the guards is slowly being replaced by a more primal, more immediate enemy, the weather. This isn't just a snowstorm, it's a blizzard, a malevolent, living entity that wants to suck the life from their bones. Sergeant Riley walks near the head of the column, his M1 slung over his shoulder. The wind howls in his ears, and he has to lean into it to make any headway. This is turning bad, real bad. He glances back at his men. They are miserable, but they are equipped for this. They have wool-lined field jackets, proper winter combat boots, gloves. The prisoners have next to nothing. He sees a young woman, no older than his sister back in Boston, her face ashen. Her hands are tucked into her armpits, but she can't stop shaking. He can already see the first signs of hypothermia setting in across the group. His orders were to march them to the collection point. The orders didn't say anything about a blizzard. The orders didn't say what to do if they started dying on their feet. An older woman, perhaps a cook or a clerk in her 40s, falters. Her legs give out and she collapses into a heap in the snow, which is now well past their ankles. The column halts. A collective, terrified gasp goes through the German women. This is it. This is the moment they have been dreading. The rule of the march, unspoken but understood by all who have lived under the Reich, is simple. If you fall, you are left. If you are a liability, you are eliminated. Annalise watches, her heart pounding against her ribs, as a tall American private stomps through the snow toward the fallen woman. He raises his rifle. Annalise squeezes her eyes shut, bracing for the crack of the gunshot that will echo through the storm. She waits. 1 second. 2. 3. No shot comes. She opens her eyes. The soldier is not pointing his rifle at the woman. He has it slung over his back. He is trying to pull her up, shouting something that is lost in the wind. The woman is a dead weight, too exhausted or too cold to move. Sergeant Riley appears at his side. He says something to the private, then kneels. Annalise watches in disbelief as the sergeant and the private haul the woman to her feet, propping her up between them. Riley barks an order, and the column lurches forward again, the two soldiers now practically carrying the faltering prisoner. Annalise doesn't understand. Why waste the energy? Why not just leave her? The propaganda had been so clear, so certain. This act of effort, this small, inexplicable gesture, makes no sense. It's a crack in the reality she thought she knew. But there is no time to ponder it. The snow is getting deeper, the wind is screaming louder, and the will to take another step is becoming the only battle that matters.
The world is gone. There are no trees, no path, no horizon. There is only the white fury of the blizzard and the ghost-like shape of the person in front of you. The snow is up to their knees now, a thick, heavy powder that clings to their legs like a shroud, making every step an act of Herculean effort. For the women, progress is measured in inches. For the GIs, burdened by their weapons, ammunition, and rucksacks, it is a grueling test of endurance. The cold is a physical presence, a predator that sinks its fangs deep into muscle and bone. Breathing hurts. The air freezes in their lungs, a searing, painful cold that offers no relief. Annalise has lost all feeling in her feet and hands. She moves automatically, a machine driven by a single, desperate command from her brain. Walk. Do not stop walking. If you stop walking, they will shoot you. The thought is a drumbeat, a mantra against the howling wind. It is the last vestige of the world she was taught, the final pillar of Nazi doctrine holding her upright. But her body is beginning to betray her. Her vision blurs. The snow is no longer white, but a swimming, nauseating gray. Her legs feel like lead posts, impossibly heavy. She stumbles, catching herself on Greta, who is in no better shape. Greta looks at her, her eyes wide with a silent, pleading terror. "I can't," Greta mouths, the words stolen by the wind. Sergeant Riley knows he has lost control, not of his men, but of the situation. They are no longer marching to a destination. They are simply trying to survive. 3 more women have collapsed in the last hour. His men, without orders, have been helping them, dragging them, pushing them forward. But now they are at their own limit. Private Miller, a farm boy from Ohio who had proven himself a stone-cold killer in the Hurtgen forest, now looks at Riley with desperation in his eyes. "Sarge, what do we do? We're not going to make it. They're not going to make it." Riley has no answer. The regulations are clear. Prisoners are the responsibility of their captors, but the safety of his own men comes first. Protocol would be to find shelter, dig in, and leave the prisoners to their fate. It's what the Germans would have done. It's what they had done to countless American prisoners during the Bulge. The thought is a sour taste in his mouth. Another woman falls, just ahead of Annalise. This time she doesn't even cry out. She just folds into the snow as if her strings have been cut. Two GIs move to help her, but they are slow, their own movements stiff with cold and exhaustion. The woman doesn't respond. One of the soldiers shakes his head grimly. It is the first death, a quiet, anonymous surrender to the cold. The sight breaks something inside the other women. A low moan ripples through the group. The last embers of their discipline, their will to march, are extinguished. Several more simply sit down in the snow, their heads bowed, a silent admission of defeat. They are done. Annalise feels her own knees buckle. The mantra, "if you stop, they will shoot you," is still there, but it has no power anymore. The fear of a bullet has been overwhelmed by the certainty of freezing. A quick death seems like a mercy now. She sinks into the soft, deadly embrace of a snowdrift. The cold is almost peaceful, a deep, numbing sleepiness that promises to end the pain. She closes her eyes, thinking of her mother in Berlin. She whispers a fragment of a prayer. She is ready. She listens for the sound of the soldiers' boots crunching towards her, for the metallic click of a rifle's safety being switched off. Instead, she feels a hand on her shoulder, shaking her gently. She ignores it. It shakes her again, harder this time. With immense effort, she forces her heavy eyelids open. A face hovers above her, red raw from the wind, a few days' worth of stubble frosted with ice. It's one of the guards, a young man with tired blue eyes. He's yelling something at her, but his voice is a distant mumble, lost in the roar of the wind and the fog in her head. He looks frustrated. Then he does something utterly incomprehensible. He unslings his rifle, lays it in the snow, shrugs off his heavy rucksack, and then points, first at her, then at his own back. He pats his shoulder, his expression a mixture of grim determination and impatience. He wants her to get on his back. Annalise stares, her frozen mind unable to process the gesture. A monster doesn't offer to carry you. An executioner doesn't lay down his weapon to save you.
Private Miller sees the confusion on the German girl's face. She's just staring at him, her eyes vacant with shock and cold. He doesn't have time for this. He grabs her arm, his thick glove covering her thin sleeve, and pulls. She's surprisingly light, all skin and bone under the wet wool. With a grunt of effort, he hauls her up and maneuvers her onto his back, her arms draping limply over his shoulders. Her body is rigid with a mixture of cold and fear. He settles her weight, retrieves his garand, and then begins to plod forward again, his boots sinking even deeper into the snow under the added burden. The simple act sends a shockwave through the stalled column. Sergeant Riley watches Miller. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't need to. He understands immediately. Protocol is dead. The rule book was written for a different world, not for this frozen hell. This is about survival now, and you don't leave people to die in the snow. Not if you want to still call yourself a man when it's all over. He turns to the woman who had collapsed near him, the one whose friends had given up on her. He helps another of his men, a corporal from Chicago named Kowalski, hoist her between them. What happens next is not a command, but a spontaneous, unspoken agreement. One by one, the soldiers of Riley's platoon, these battle-hardened GIs who had seen their friends die in the most horrific ways, begin to help their prisoners. They see their sergeant and their squad mates acting, and they follow suit. A tall, lanky private from Texas helps a small, sobbing woman to her feet, and then, realizing she can't walk, scoops her up in his arms like a child. Another soldier takes off his own heavy field jacket and drapes it over two shivering girls huddled together, leaving himself in just his wool sweater and shirt. He breaks a D-bar of military chocolate from his K-rations and presses a piece into each of their numb hands. For Annalise, the world has turned upside down. She is on the American's back, her face pressed against the rough, damp wool of his uniform. She can feel the warmth of his body seeping through the layers of clothing, a warmth she thought she would never feel again. His movements are slow and deliberate, a testament to the immense effort it takes to move through the blizzard with her weight. She can smell his sweat, the faint scent of gun oil, and the lingering aroma of tobacco. It is the smell of a soldier, but not the smell of a beast. She lifts her head slightly and looks around. Through the swirling snow, she sees the most surreal procession imaginable. American soldiers, their faces set in grim lines of exertion, are carrying their enemies. Some carry women on their backs, piggyback style. Others have them slung over their shoulders in a fireman's carry. Two soldiers are supporting a third woman between them. It is no longer a prisoner march.
It has become a rescue mission. The propaganda, all of it, dissolves in the biting wind. The carefully constructed images of the depraved, inhuman army are shattered by the undeniable reality of a strong back and a shared coat. These were not the monsters from the newsreels. They were just men. Young men, like her brother on the Eastern Front. Tired men. They were fighting a war, but in this moment they had chosen to fight the storm instead of their enemies. A profound sense of shame washes over her, so powerful it almost makes her warm. She and the others had been ready to die, convinced that these soldiers would be their executioners. But they had misjudged them completely. The truth was, in this white hell, their captors had become their saviors. The sun, a pale, unseen disk somewhere behind the wall of cloud, is beginning to set. The gray light is fading to a deep, bruised purple. The cold intensifies with the approaching night. The column, now a struggling chain of rescuers and survivors, is moving at a glacial pace. Sergeant Riley, at the front, peers into the gloom, his eyes stinging. He can barely see 10 feet ahead. They can't stay out here for the night. Nobody would survive. Just as the last vestiges of hope begin to fade, he sees it. A flicker. A faint rectangular patch of yellow light, impossibly distant, appearing and disappearing through the thick curtain of snow. A farmhouse. A barn. Shelter. It might as well be a miracle. He finds a new reserve of strength and shouts into the wind, his voice raw. Light! I see a light! This way! Keep moving!
Reaching the source of the light is the final, agonizing trial. It's an old stone barn, set back from the path, its windows glowing with the warm, inviting light of a lantern. The effort to cross the last 100 yards of snow-choked field nearly breaks them. GIs stumble and fall, dropping their precious cargo, only to be helped up by their comrades. They function now as one organism, driven by the singular goal of reaching that door. When Sergeant Riley finally shoves the heavy wooden barn door open, the wave of relief is a physical force. Inside, the air is still and smells richly of old hay, manure, and livestock. A single hurricane lamp hangs from a beam, casting long, dancing shadows. The place is empty, save for a few chickens roosting in the rafters. It is the most beautiful sanctuary they have ever seen. The soldiers gently lower the women to the dry, hay-strewn floor. For a few moments, no one speaks. The only sound is the roar of the blizzard outside and the ragged, collective gasping for breath. The boundary between captor and captive seems to have vanished at the door. Inside this small arc of survival, they are simply people, united by their shared ordeal. Private Miller helps Annalise slide off his back. She tries to stand, but her legs won't support her. He eases her down onto a pile of hay without a word. She looks at him, really looks at him, for the first time. His face is chapped and windburned, and there are lines of deep fatigue around his eyes, but his expression is one of weary concern, not malice. She wants to say thank you, but the German words stick in her throat, useless. Instead, she just nods, a small, jerky movement. He nods back before turning to help the others. Sergeant Riley begins to organize his men with quiet efficiency. 2 of them are sent to find wood for a fire. Another checks the perimeter. The rest tend to the prisoners. The GIs move among the exhausted women, checking for frostbite, sharing their canteens filled with lukewarm, metallic-tasting water. They don't have much. K-rations are designed for sustenance, not comfort, but they share what they have. A soldier with a Zippo lighter, its flame a tiny beacon of warmth, moves from woman to woman, letting them warm their frozen fingers over the flickering fire. The gesture is small, but the intimacy is profound. Annalise watches as a GI sits down next to Greta, who is weeping silently. He clumsily pats her on the shoulder. He says something in English she doesn't understand, but his tone is gentle, reassuring. He opens a small tin from his ration pack and offers her a piece of hard candy. Greta stares at it, then at him, before taking it with trembling fingers. Slowly, the atmosphere in the barn begins to change. The raw terror of the march gives way to a stunned, quiet gratitude. The German women huddle together, whispering amongst themselves, their eyes following the American soldiers with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Everything they had been taught, everything they had believed about their enemy, had been proven a lie in the space of a few hours. These were not the savage hordes Goebbels had warned them about. These were men who had carried them, clothed them, and saved them, demanding nothing in return. As a small fire crackles to life in the center of the barn, casting a warm orange glow on their faces, the 2 groups remain largely separate, but the invisible wall between them has crumbled. They are no longer American soldiers and German prisoners. They are simply survivors, huddled together against a storm, sharing the meager warmth of a fire in the heart of a shattered continent. The war still rages outside the barn's stone walls, and tomorrow the march will continue. They will be taken to a proper POW camp, and the soldiers will move on to the next town, the next battle. But for everyone in that barn, something has irrevocably shifted.
Annalise Schmidt looks across the fire at Sergeant John Riley. He catches her eye and gives a slight, tired nod of acknowledgement. In that silent exchange, a powerful truth is communicated. Even in the deepest winter of humanity's hatred, a single act of compassion can be enough to keep the light from going out completely.